and welcome back to yet another episode of On The Grid Podcast. We are on episode 11 today. I'm your host, Adrian Kita, once again joined by my co-host, Ethan Evans. Today, in this episode, we will be reflecting on our Azerbaijan predictions, reflecting on all the drivers' performance in Azerbaijan, that is quali, shootout, sprint, and race included, alongside our Miami predictions and a 1 to 10 driver ratings. Ethan, first and foremost, how did you find Azerbaijan? It was good to be back. We're obviously going to be hopping into another weekend on the back of this. You'll be most likely hearing this episode on Friday when we practice, because we're a little bit late. But yeah, Ethan, what are your honest reflections on Azerbaijan?
Well, first of all, it's good to have Formula One back. I think we had so many sessions this weekend that it was hard to actually keep track because it felt very strange on Saturday morning after just having the race qualifying to then have another qualifying session, to then have a race, to then have another race. It all felt a little bit too much, and unfortunately the racing didn't really provide too much entertainment for us. I think it actually went downhill as the weekend progressed, where you had the actual qualifying on the Friday was the highlight, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, overall it was a little bit disappointing, but Formula One is back, and that's a good thing.
Most definitely. So let's kick off the episode with reflecting on our Azerbaijan predictions with obviously usually do our 2-star predictions, a quali predictions, which we did, a sprint predictions, but sprint race, not the shootout, and the actual race. So, Ethan, why don't you kick us off with your 2-star predictions? What were they, and were you successful in 2 out of 2?
Well, I was very successful. One of them was a little bit lucky. So the first one, Sonoda points, got P10 in the race. Beautiful. The second one, Gasly to beat Ocon. Now, he shouldn't have. Gasly had a terrible weekend. However, due to the late pit stop, Gasly finished 14th and Esteban Ocon finished 15th. So I will take that point and run with it. Very happy with that. So 2 points for that.
Very good performance from you, must say. My 2-star predictions were AlphaTauri to make a Q3 appearance, which Sonoda did. He qualified 8th for the race, so jobs are good. And I said Williams to get points. Albon finished 12th, Sargent finished 16th, so I wasn't too far off. So I'll take the 1 point for it. No matter what, I'll take the 1 point. Reflecting on our qualifying predictions, I'll go first, which I think it shocked all of us when we saw Charles Leclerc on pole position with Max Verstappen second and Perez in third. I predicted Verstappen to get pole, and Perez to get second, Leclerc in third, Alonso fourth, and Sainz in fifth. So technically, the top 4 there, I wasn't far away. There were a couple of places in and out, but unfortunately, I got 0 correct because Leclerc just pulled it out the bag. Ethan, how did you get on? Did Leclerc catch you out as well?
Leclerc did catch me out. However, I went for Sergio Perez to get pole. So I went for Verstappen to get second. So I got a point for that. I'm happy about that. However, the rest of it is shocking. I went for Hamilton third, qualified 5th. Alonso 4th, and obviously here they had those DRS issues. And Russell 5th, and he didn't even make it into Q3. So not a good performance there.
Do you want to go through your sprint predictions? I think that one is another one, but caught both of us out lucky.
Again, yeah, shocking again. I went for Verstappen to win the sprint. Then I went for Fernando Alonso to finish second, Sergio Perez third, Leclerc 4th, Hamilton 5th. So 0 out of 5 on that one.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking the same on this one. So obviously I predicted Verstappen to win the sprint. He came third. Perez to come second. He won the sprint. Alonso in third. He was nowhere to be seen. Leclerc to come fourth. He came second. And Russell to come fifth. And obviously we know what happened there. So yeah, another 0 out of 5 for me, which is shocking. But moving on to the race, I finally get a point on the board with Fernando Alonso finishing P4. Thank the Lord Alonso finished 4th. But I had Verstappen to win the race, which it was Perez. Hamilton to come second. I thought, you know what, chuck a wild card in there. Did not happen. Perez to finish third. Yeah, we know what happened there. He won the race. Alonso to finish 4th, which came through. And Russell to come 5th, which it was actually Carlos Sainz who came 5th. Ethan, did you get any points from the race?
Shocking. I had Verstappen, Perez first and second, and obviously they were the other way around. I had Alonso third. He almost got third, but obviously Leclerc held him off. Hamilton 4th and Russell 5th. So I backed the Mercedes boys and they did not deliver for me. So I got a measly 1 out of 15, which is absolutely shocking for those predictions.
Yeah, I think in Baku, now reflecting on it, we've got to expect the unexpected. And I think most certainly that weekend, especially with it being a sprint weekend, we had to expect the unexpected, and it delivered. But moving on to our driver review. If we were going to do a race review, we'd be reviewing qualifying, the shootout, the sprint, and the race. We'll be here for about 2-3 hours. So to break it down a little bit, we'll go driver by driver, reflecting their weekend and looking how they performed before we rate them near the end of the episode. So where better to begin? Can look at our sprint winner and our race winner, Sergio Perez. Obviously, qualifying P3, you're expecting him to be up there regardless. Shootout P2, sprint P1, race P1. I think all in all, the street circuit magician struck again, and he closed the gap in the championship.
Indeed, yes. 2 wins. You can't really ask for much more. The first repeat winner in Baku, by the way, Sergio Perez. No other driver has won 2 races at Azerbaijan. He is the first. All in all, a very good weekend. I thought he was a lot closer to Verstappen, especially in qualifying, where that has been a bit of a weakness. That is for Sergio Perez, but he was a lot closer to Max Verstappen. Beat him in the sprint qualifying, obviously, and then in both races had the quicker pace. So all in all, I think it's a near perfect weekend for Sergio Perez at Baku.
You could argue it is a perfect weekend apart from qualifying, where he qualified third. It could have been perfect if he qualified on pole. But dropping down to P2 man, Max Verstappen, he qualified second. In the shootout, he was third. He finished the sprint in third and finished the race in P2. By Max Verstappen's standards, do you think that this is a slip-up with him not winning the race?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So I think in the sprint, he was obviously hampered by that collision with Russell, which don't get me started on that. But in the race, it wasn't his fault that he got demoted. The yellow flag was out when De Vries crashed. Then Red Bull brought him in, and then the safety car was brought out. So in that sense, it wasn't his fault. But the gap stayed between 1 and 2 seconds for about 40 laps, and then for about 30 laps. And then those last 10 laps, Perez extended it to sort of 3 to 4 seconds. So it is a missed opportunity, but it's also fair credit to Perez where he deserves it. He had the better pace this weekend, and we've gone about this over the last 4 races. It's been nobody can catch Verstappen in Bahrain. Then is Perez a title contender in Saudi? Then Verstappen's going to walk away with the championship again after Australia, and now we're looking again at Sergio Perez being a title contender. Perez can improve his pace. We all know how good he is around street circuits. If he can improve that pace around the traditional circuits, sort of when we get to that stage of where we've got Silverstone, Hungary, and then after the summer break where we have Spa, Monza, those sorts of tracks, if he can get closer to Verstappen in those areas, in those tracks, there's no reason why he can't compete for a championship. But it's too soon to tell at this point. But for Verstappen, he'll be bitterly disappointed, how much he likes to win and how much he says he likes to win. But yeah, no, I think he'll be a little bit disappointed with his performance this weekend.
On the back of that question, do you think that tensions are slowly rising at Red Bull? We obviously saw what happened after the sprint, where I think it was after the sprint, where Perez was obviously won the sprint, and Verstappen went over to Russell, I think it was, saying, there was no grip, etc. Didn't even congratulate his teammate one bit. Didn't acknowledge him. Do you think slowly, because the 2 Red Bulls are in a title battle, do you think that tensions might boil over if it continues this way?
Possibly. We did see them boil over a little bit last season. I would love to see Perez get that combative side, get at Verstappen, really put him under some pressure and see how he responds. Otherwise, it's just going to be an easy 3rd world championship for Max Verstappen. I don't know if the incident after the sprint is necessarily tension between the Red Bull drivers. I think it was just Verstappen being a petulant little child. For a racing incident, a lap 1 incident. We spoke about after Australia about the collision between Stroll and Leclerc and how it was the most racing incident of racing incidents. This is exactly the same. It's a street circuit, narrow turns, not a lot of space. These things happen. But no, I don't think after the sprint race that reflects on the any tension between the two drivers. No.
Moving on from the two Red Bull drivers to Charles Leclerc. Finally, I can rave about a podium. I can rave about not one, but two podiums. Charles Leclerc, P1 in qualifying, P1 in a shootout, P2 in sprint, and P3 in the race. Obviously, one lap pace, I think Ferrari absolutely smashed it. But when it comes to racing, I think they fade away a little bit, especially with the DRS being so powerful in the Red Bulls, giving them, I believe it was 30 kilometers per hour more speed down the straight with DRS. So Leclerc had no chance defending against those two. But all in all, I think Charles will be happy with a podium, and I think Ferrari will be happy to see their man back on the podium, because they've had really, really bad luck in their opening first races, and I think a podium is a necessary escape from that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was exactly what he needed. He's had a difficult start to the season, and then that pole on Friday, I think, caught everybody out. Over the one lap, especially Leclerc and Ferrari seemed to have a lot of good pace. You saw, was it at Saudi, he qualified second. Obviously, he got that grid penalty. At Bahrain, he was third. He's got very good pace over one lap. It just seems to be the race pace they struggle with a little bit more, especially when compared to Red Bull. But then again, everybody struggles compared to Red Bull in that sense. But I think this was exactly what Leclerc needed. He needed a podium. He needed a response, and he got it.
From Ferrari to a former Ferrari driver in Fernando Alonso, he finished the race in fourth. But I think overall, he would be a little bit, I don't want to say a little bit disheartened by his performance, because he finished fourth. But I think overall in qualifying, in the shootout and in the sprint, those three, I think he will feel a little bit, well, he could have put more on the table. In a sense, because Aston Martin has capabilities that we've seen throughout this season, where they can just deliver out of nowhere. The race, I think, kind of rescued Fernando Alonso's weekend, but all in all, I think it could have been a little bit better for Fernando. Looking over, obviously, the past couple of races, it could have been a lot better, but nevertheless, P4 in the race for him. Carlos Sainz, another Ferrari man, finished P5. I think one of his better weekends. Obviously, qualified fourth, shootout fifth, sprint fifth, race fifth. I think that's what Ferrari need from their second driver. I'm not going to label him as a second driver. I'll put it in quotation marks, because I think Ferrari are equal with their drivers. I think that's what Carlos also needed. A little bit more near the front end of the field to kind of put a little bit more confidence back onto his shoulders and make him actually believe that maybe this season is salvageable. Sixth place, Lewis Hamilton. I'll skip those two just to go to your thoughts on Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, qualified fifth, shootout sixth, sprint seventh. You're going backwards here, and then race sixth. All in all, I think Hamilton would be slightly disappointed with sixth in the race, but I think he'll look at it and think points are points at the end of the day, and you take them, you move on, and you go again.
Yeah, it's funny how we, the decline of Mercedes, where, 2 years ago, if Hamilton qualified fifth, you'd think, oh, what's happened here? Last year, if he qualified fifth, you'd think, okay, that's a pretty standard qualifying. And this year, when he's qualifying fifth, you're thinking, oh, that's a great result. It's just, obviously you had two more teams come into the mix on that one, and Mercedes have regressed. But I think Hamilton actually performed very well this weekend. He got screwed by the safety car. He pitted like 2 laps before the safety car, ended up coming out 10th after the safety car, got Ocon and Hulkenberg, it was, on that first corner into turn one, which was a great double overtake, and then produced a brilliant overtake on George Russell down the inside. Two drivers going hard at it. A lovely move down the inside into turn one. But overall, we just couldn't overtake Sainz. I think the Ferrari looked quite good this weekend, especially in a straight line. It looked like it may have been the second quickest car. And we know the problems with DRS made it a little bit of a dull race this weekend. But I think Hamilton done the best he could. Obviously, he'll be disappointed he couldn't get fourth or fifth, but overall, you've got to take it, especially given the circumstances where he dropped down to P10 after the safety car.
On to Lance Stroll. Qualified P9, shootout P9, sprint P8, race P7. One question really. Do you think Lance Stroll is performing to the levels that Aston Martin require of him? Obviously, we've seen Fernando bolt away, get numerous podiums. Do you think that a podium or two would salvage Lance's kind of season at Aston Martin, especially with him having a quick car? We saw it at Racing Point. It happened at Racing Point. I think he only got one podium. Do you think that this is a season where Lance Stroll really needs to capitalise on a rapid car underneath him?
Yeah, we did see it at Racing Point. I think he did get the one podium, and then in the next 7 races, he didn't get any points. Based on this weekend, I don't necessarily think so. However, he does need to get at least a podium, maybe 2 or 3, to really cement himself as, being capable of having this good a car underneath him. Everybody's seen how good Alonso has been, and although there's not going to be any pressure under Stroll for that race seat, doesn't matter if he crashes out the next 5 races. There should be. I think when you compare him to Alonso, he's disappointed. I mean, I haven't got the positions right from our pre-season podcast where we ranked the drivers 1 to 20. Didn't think the Aston Martin was going to be as good as it has been, but I did say that there's going to be a big gap between Stroll and Alonso, and we saw half a minute between the 2 cars. Bear in mind there was a safety car on lap 10. That's about a second a lap. Alonso was quicker than Stroll. That's not good. So I think he's going to be under pressure for the next few races, but eventually it's not going to make any difference because he is going to keep that seat until he decides enough is enough.
Let's not forget Daddy's cash. So Lance will probably end up staying until the end of his career at Aston Martin or wherever his dad buys. Whatever venture he does, he'll follow his father's footsteps and kind of have a seat secured.
You never know. Maybe his dad will buy a stake in Ferrari and he'll end up a Ferrari driver.
Don't say that. Let's not say that. Let's not say that, please. I'm happy with the driver pairing at the moment at Ferrari. Maybe he does it at Mercedes. You never know. He'll chuck Hamilton out and Stroll and Russell.
What a change that would be. A 7-time world champion, the Lance Stroll.
Yeah. What a difference money makes. But moving on to another Mercedes driver, George Russell. Ethan talked me through Russell's weekend. We obviously talked about the collision with Max Verstappen, but all in all, I don't think Russell will be disappointed, especially with his shootout and sprint performance, bearing in mind those were both 4th place finishes.
Yeah, I think he had a difficult Friday, didn't make it through to Q3. I think there was a problem at some point with the Mercedes on their run. Hamilton's in P10, Russell in P11 at the end of Q2. But Saturday was a different story. He qualified 4th, best of the rest, essentially, because, Red Bull and Leclerc seem to be the top 3. And then he done well for 4th place in the sprint. He was comfortably clear of Sainz, I think it was, who was 5th in the sprint. But then in the race again, starting further back, he did struggle. Couldn't overtake Stroll for P7. If he had, maybe he could have put some pressure on Hamilton for 6th. Who knows? But it was a tale of 2 halves for Russell. Well, in sort of the middle of the weekend, the Saturday was great, and then the Friday and the Sunday wasn't too much to talk home about. But all in all, I think it was a solid weekend for Russell. Good points on the Saturday. I think he actually got more points on the Saturday than he did on the Sunday. I think he got 5 points for 4th on the Saturday in the sprint and only 4 in the race. Yeah, so that tells you all you need to know, I think.
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly for George Russell. On to another British driver though, Lando Norris. Question to start it off: are McLaren back?
I think they're where they should have been, to be honest. I think, if you put a good car with Lando Norris, he has proven he will deliver, and he has delivered. And I think he'll continue to deliver over these next few races. He had that difficult start to the season. They brought some upgrades. It seemed they got lucky in the chaos at Australia. And then when you could really see the effect of these new upgrades, they seem to have good pace. They seem to have the best of the rest pace, Lando Norris, which again, he's steadily regressed. So best of the rest in 2021 was 5th. Last season it was 7th. Now best of the rest is 9th. Lando Norris picked up 2 points for being the best of the midfield cars, which is shocking, really. But good points for McLaren, and Piastri putting in a good performance as well this weekend.
We'll talk a little bit about Oscar in a moment, but moving on to Yuki Tsunoda, he finished the race in 10th for final points finisher. Finally got another point to his name after he kind of slithered his way through the chaos in Australia. Qualified P8. Shootout wasn't fantastic. Same with the sprint in DNF. But the race, he kind of just stabilised and got the point that he needed to. So all in all, I think Yuki, once again, I think did very well to claim a point and to gain another point for AlphaTauri in the Constructors' Championship. But moving on to Oscar Piastri, the best of the rookie drivers. Obviously, Sargent was down a bit lower in 16th and De Vries DNF'd from the race. But again, I think Oscar has experience around Baku with Formula 3 and Formula 2, if I'm not mistaken. Most definitely Formula 2, but I don't know about Formula 3. But again, I think another solid weekend for him. He obviously missed out on points, but I think to be top 10 in pretty much all the sessions, shootout 11th and the race 11th, I think again it shows a big step in the right direction for the Australian.
Yeah, he showed good pace this weekend. I think he would be a little bit disappointed that he finished 10th in the sprint and then 11th in the race, and not the other way around, so that he could get a point in the race. But all in all, it's a solid weekend. He was one of the victims of the DRS train, which added to the excitement of the 30 laps of watching about 8 cars follow each other around. But yeah, I think he almost caught Tsunoda at the end. He tried to put him under a little bit of pressure, didn't quite make it happen. But, if this is a sign of things to come, I think Piastri will take a weekend like this after the first 2 races in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. So I think he'll be quite happy with this performance.
On to Alex Albon, P12 in the race, P9th in the sprint, P7 in the shootout, P13 in qualifying. Obviously a hero in Australia before his crash. Baku could have been similar if he transpired that shootout position in the sprint and got some points. The race, obviously we spoke about the DRS train being a complete nightmare, which it has been for forever in F1. It's a constant issue. I'm going to raise a question about DRS after we talked about Albon, but I think Alex is continuing to knock on the door to get points. And do you think, Ethan, that Williams will be able to deliver more points finishes for Albon, especially looking at his performances throughout the season so far?
Well, let's hope so. Yeah, he's already got a point in the board in the first race. Should have got points on the board at Australia, and very almost done the same again in Baku this weekend. So 3 of the first 4 races and he's competing for points. That's a good sign. If you're Alex Albon and at Williams, it's going to be difficult to rack up a lot of points because, as we said, Lando Norris finished best of the rest this weekend and he finished 9th. So for those midfield cars, it's going to be difficult to accumulate points. And I think it's going to be quite a low-scoring constructor standings from 4th downwards. But I think Albon's doing just about the best he can, really, at that Williams. He did make a good comment, actually, after the sprint, where, this is going to keep happening. And you're just going to get those front 4 teams occupy the 8 point spaces. And the same on Sunday as well. He makes a good point there, but, unfortunately, it's one of those things. But, yeah, no, I think Albon's put in a really good performance this weekend again.
Touching on DRS, burning question that obviously I would like to put to you. Do you think that DRS should be in the sport or should not be in the sport? Let me expand on it a little bit. We're obviously seeing so many DRS trains formed, and to put that into bigger perspective, we talked about Red Bull's advantage of 30 kilometers an hour more when they have DRS to a Ferrari that has no DRS. Realistically thinking, will it make more interesting races if we took racing if we took DRS out and just had the sheer speed of the machinery without any DRS at all?
No, I don't think so. I think we need DRS. I think F1 is too reliant on DRS at the minute. I think the problem is with the rear wings. If you think about if you have a rear wing around, say, Monaco, where it's going to be a very pronounced rear wing with producing a lot of drag. The difference in the reduction of drag through DRS at a Monaco level rear wing compared to a Baku level rear wing, and same with Monza, there's going to be a bigger difference because it's going to be reducing a higher amount of drag. So I think F1 needs to implement maybe a minimum rear wing angle. So we don't have, say, Monza level wings or Baku level wings, and they have to run a certain level of downforce on that rear wing so that DRS is more effective, because we can't keep having a DRS train. So maybe that's something they need to look into to improve the efficiency of DRS, because for 30 laps, Esteban Ocon and Nico Hulkenberg were just running, 9th and 10th. And Lando Norris, despite being quicker than both of them and on fresher tyres, wasn't able to overtake. Even when Hulkenberg dropped out of DRS range of Ocon, he still wasn't able to overtake. So they need to introduce a limit, I think, on the minimum downforce that they have to run in order to improve the efficiency of DRS. That's what I think. I'm no expert, but that's just my take on it.
Kevin Magnussen is up next in our review. He finished the race in 13th. I think his weekend kind of started on a really low after qualifying 18th, perked up a little bit after a shootout performance, finishing 14th. His sprint was kind of his peak in 11th, and then the race kind of dropped down again. Honest thoughts on Kevin Magnussen. Haas haven't been able to deliver what they've been delivering over the last season, especially. But do you think that Haas, similarly to Williams, are capable of potentially snatching a point or two here or there?
Yeah, I think Magnussen had problems in qualifying on the Friday, which I think caused him to qualify 18th. And then obviously he was another victim of the DRS train, the dreaded DRS train, as we're going to call it from now on. So there wasn't too much he can do. 13th, it's not great, but maybe on a track where, maybe in a race where this doesn't happen, this DRS train doesn't form, he can maybe look at overtaking sort of Albon, Piastri that were just ahead of him. But it's difficult to say. This is, for the midfield here, this is a really difficult race to actually assess how well they actually perform and how much is down to the fact they couldn't overtake for 30 laps. So I don't know. I think Magnussen had an okay weekend. He'd be disappointed that he couldn't push higher, and that, the race he did perform well in was the sprint. And, you only get points for the top 8 and he finished 11th. So who knows? I don't know. A difficult one to judge for Magnussen, but Haas have looked decent this season so far. So I think they can get some points on the board. I think they can get some points in the next few races, especially.
The two Alpines are up next. Gasly and Ocon, 14th and 15th in the race. I think it was just a calamities for Alpine. I don't think they did very well. Qualifying for Ocon was better than for Gasly. The shootout for Gasly was tragic. The sprint for Ocon was tragic. And then the race was just calamitous. I don't think Alpine did themselves any justice in the race or throughout this weekend. I think they really just have to look past this weekend and move on, start afresh, because they just were nowhere to be seen, really.
Well, yeah, from the highs at Melbourne, which ended up being very low, to the lows at Baku, which were even lower somehow. Gasly had that issue in practice and then crashed in qualifying. Had an issue during the sprint qualifying, and then he recovered quite well in the sprint, but then the race again showed no pace. Was a bit of a victim to the DRS train. But an awful weekend for Pierre Gasly, not one to shout about. He'll be hoping that, I think he'll be glad that the next race is only a week away. It's only in Miami, so that he can put it behind him. Esteban Ocon, I think he was a little bit unlucky. I think he was, if there was a red flag with like 10 laps to go or a safety car, and Ocon done brilliantly and then put on a pair of softs and ended up finishing 9th. Everybody will be saying, what an amazing weekend for Ocon, what an amazing race. Starting from the pit lane as well, remember. An amazing race and a great strategy, and he got what he deserved. But it didn't quite pan out that way. He finished 15th in the end behind his teammate, giving me a point for our predictions, but not what he wanted for Ocon. I think he was very unlucky though.
Can we label Esteban Ocon as the unlucky man this season?
I think so. Well, I mean, at Bahrain, that was his fault. But then, Australia, it wasn't his fault. And then here, it wasn't his fault. So, maybe. If there's a few more races like he had on Sunday, maybe.
On to Logan Sargent, the second of our rookies. 15th in qualifying, 15th in the shootout, sprint DNF, race 16th. That was a little bit hard on Logan Sargent. I think he's finding it tough to find his feet at Williams. But then again, you're not going to find your feet straight away at one of the back markers. Alex Albon has enjoyed some pain at Williams, but he's slowly kind of getting up to speed, and he's been slowly showing what he can do. But Ethan, do you think that Logan Sargent can really fight with Alex Albon to push that Williams car even further up the field, or do you think that this season is a learning curve for him, and whatever points he'll get is an added bonus?
Well, this season might be a learning curve, but he might not get another if he doesn't perform. He had a fantastic first race in Bahrain, and then ever since he's been pretty anonymous. This weekend he was nowhere. Finished 16th in the end. So yeah, 16th. Didn't start in the sprint because he binned it during the sprint shootout. Crashed and left the engineers a load of work after getting through to Q2 as well. Done quite well to get through to Q2, as in Friday qualifying, and then smashed his car up and then he couldn't start. So it is a learning curve for Logan Sargent. Hopefully he can respond. It's his home race at Miami, so maybe he can put in a good performance and maybe get his first points at his home race, like Oscar Piastri did.
Let's not forget, Logan Sargent does have a few home races.
It's going to be about 10 home races in a few seasons' time, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So, all in all, I think Logan can only learn from his performances in Baku. Continuing on with our driver review, moving on to Nico Hülkenberg, who finished the race in 17th. A bad day in the office on the Friday. The Saturday was a little bit better for him, but then the Sunday it was the same. Ultimately, I think I would say a weekend to forget for Nico Hülkenberg, especially with his high standards in qualifying. I think the stress of the Saturday with the shootout and the sprint didn't help, and then the race, we just saw him not move a position from his qualifying position, which was 17th.
Yeah, it was a little bit disappointing to see both Haas cars out in Q1 on the Friday, and it wasn't a whole lot better on the Saturday, in terms of they both got through to Q2, but it wasn't where they want to be yet, but sort of fighting for Q3. And then on the race, I think he was again very unlucky. We saw how much his tyres fell off in those last few laps before he came in for the eventual pit stop on around like lap 47, lap 48. Running in P10 for the majority of the race, but obviously didn't pit. Again, similar to Ocon, he was just waiting for something to happen, and unfortunately for him, it didn't. So yeah, a disappointing weekend for Hülkenberg, but there's always Miami again, as we said, in a week's time to put that behind him and get a decent performance in.
We're saying a week's time; it's this weekend. Technically speaking, you say this week's a week's time, but it's this weekend. We're recording this podcast.
A week's time from the race is what I meant. From the race.
We just need clarity, and there's the clarity.
That's clarified.
Completely clarified. Our final race finisher in Baku was Valtteri Bottas. What is happening with VB? What is happening? Qualifying, he finally made it out of Q1, which is a positive. But then the shootout, the sprint, and the race. What on earth is going on with Bottas? Where are his consistent performances gone? Seriously, what's happening?
Yeah, it's like we said. We said after Bahrain, we were praising him for putting in such a good performance, but getting some good points. Since then, he's been abysmal. What was it? 18th in Saudi Arabia, 11th in Australia out of 12, and the only person behind him got a 5-second penalty, and 18th here again. It's not good enough. He needs to be putting in better performances. Otherwise, his seat will come under scrutiny, as it should, because he's being outperformed by his teammate who's only in his second season in F1.
Do you think that his Alfa Romeo seat is under scrutiny, Valtteri Bottas, that is? I think it's coming out under a little bit of pressure, surely.
Well, yeah, these last 3 races, he's been miles off the pace. He's been shocking. I tell you, he can't continue to have weekends like he did this weekend. I'll tell you that. I don't think it is under pressure. I don't think that is going to happen, that he could be under pressure from losing his seat. But it's something that needs to be talked about. He needs to be putting in better performances than he did on this weekend in in total.
Moving on to his teammate, Guan Yu Zhou, 16th in qualifying, 16th in the shootout, 12th in the sprints, but DNF from the race. Two out of 4 categories here, he out-qualified it. Well, he outperformed his teammate. Qualifying not far away. Obviously, Bottas got into Q2, Zhou didn't. And in the race, obviously, the DNF kind of cost Guan Yu Zhou. But all in all, I think we said it. We said it in the last episode where we talked about, or it might have been a few episodes ago, where we talked about Guan Yu Zhou kind of stepping up to the plate. I think he's slowly and surely taking the reins off Bottas, and Bottas is slowly slipping behind. Do you agree?
Yeah, this is what I mean when I'm talking about Bottas being outperformed. Zhou has put in fantastic performances ever since he's come into F1. Everybody was shocked about how good he was because, to be honest, I don't think many people expected him to be as good as he has been in Formula One. He was a match for Bottas come the end of last season, and then this season, all in all, you've got to say he's been better than Bottas. I don't think he has the same amount of points. I think he is behind Bottas. Yeah, Bottas has 4 points compared to Zhou's 2. But overall, he has been outperforming Bottas this season. He was very unlucky until he retired in this race. I think he might have been running up in sort of P12, P13 before his retirement. So maybe there was a chance of getting some points if his car didn't break down and he needed to retire from the race.
From a decent performance from Guan Yu Zhou to an absolute disaster class from Nick De Vries. His car, obviously, it wasn't his fault that his car obviously broke down. But I think this weekend was just the lowest of the lows that you can possibly get for Nick De Vries as a rookie. P20 in qualifying, P20 in the shootout, P14 in the sprint, and in the race, a whopping fantastic DNF. Yeah, another person where a race weekend to forget applies, most definitely.
I think this could be one of the worst all-round weekends from a personal weekend ever. You know, he crashed in qualifying on the Friday, qualified last in the sprint qualifying, finished 14th in the sprint, but that doesn't tell the entire tale because Sargent didn't start, Sonoda didn't finish, and then 3 cars were on soft tyres and had to pit. So essentially at P14, it's P90. The only car he really beat was Hulkenberg, who was experiencing his own problems during the sprint race. And then to crash out again in the race is bitterly disappointing for De Vries. That's the second crash of the weekend, and both were absolute howlers. On the Friday, into turn 3, you need to back out of that. You need to have the knowledge and the experience to back out of that. Like we saw Sainz do. Sainz knew he was going to make that corner, and instead of trying to keep going and fight it and end up putting it in the wall and ruining his qualifying, he just went down the escape road. There was an escape road there for a reason. And then the one and the race is unforgivable. He's just taken too much on the inside. He's just crashed into the barrier on the inside and broken his front left suspension completely. Yeah, as I said, probably one of the worst all-round performances out of any weekend from any driver.
On that note, let's roll on to our driver ratings. 1 out of 10, each driver. Let's begin with our race winner, our sprint winner, Sergio Perez. I've gone with a 9.5 out of 10. It could have been a 10 out of 10 if his qualifying performance and his shootout performance, obviously, if he put himself on pole, 10 out of 10 for me. Like we said when we started this review of all the drivers, it's a near perfect weekend with the 2 P1s, but I've given him a 9.5 out of 10.
Fair enough. I've gone for a 10 out of 10. I just thought he had as good a weekend as you can realistically hope for. Sergio Perez, he won both races, was quicker than his teammate, a double world champion. I think you've got to give him credit. And now I actually saw a stat earlier, which I don't think he'll like, is that Sergio Perez has as many wins from Charles Leclerc pole positions as Charles Leclerc has from Charles Leclerc pole positions. We always joked about name a more iconic duo last season about a Charles Leclerc pole and a Max Verstappen win. And now Perez is hopping on that as well. So I thought you would enjoy that. But yeah, no, it was a fantastic weekend from Perez. And I think he done everything he can and he closed that gap more importantly. But I'm happy to concede and go for a 9.5 on this one because he did have a poor qualifying third for the race and got a little bit lucky with the strategy.
I just wanted to be happy a little bit, and you've just thrown me in the mud completely with that stat. I mean, we'll take it. It's you learn something new every day. But
I think
Leclerc,
I think this pole position though you can kind of forgive it though because he never had any hope about winning this race. But you
no,
know,
especially battling with a car that's going 30 kmh more than you down a straight with DRS. There's no chance.
exactly. I think he done exceptionally well to even get that car on pole.
And he did exceptionally well to even keep Fernando Alonso behind, because I think the Aston Martin is even quicker in a straight line than Ferrari.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Moving on to Verstappen, I've given him an 8 out of 10. I think that by Verstappen standards, he would have wanted to win that race, and he would have wanted to come even higher in the sprint, was it not for that incident with a certain George Russell. But yeah, I think for Verstappen standards, I think it's a poor weekend of a books. And especially with your teammate closing a gap on you in the championship, it puts even pressure on your shoulders as the current reigning world champion. So I've given him an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, no, I agree. I gave him a 7, so I was slightly harsher than you, especially by Verstappen standards. To not even He didn't win any of the actual sessions, didn't qualify on pole for either of those qualifying sessions, and didn't win any of the races. So I think that, Verstappen had a disappointing weekend. Got beaten as well by Leclerc in the sprint race. And then obviously didn't have the same pace as his teammate in the actual race. So I gave him a 7, but we'll have to compromise on a 7.5 there.
Leclerc gets a 9 from me. Third place.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
I think, okay, hold the phone. Hold the phone. To me, personally, I think getting back onto the podium is a massive confidence booster for Ferrari and Charles Leclerc. Let's think about it. Qualifying is a personality trait of Charles Leclerc. He's not had the luxury of doing as good this season. This pole position, yes, brilliant. Shootout as well, P1 there as well. So and then obviously 2 podiums in a P2 and a P3 in the sprint and in the race. So I don't think he could have done anything more. Like we said, he wasn't obviously going to battle with the Red Bulls. The Red Bulls are far superior. So I think it's as best as he could have done, without it being a 10 out of 10, which a second or a first place could have bumped him to a 10 out of 10. But I think a 9 out of 10 for his overall one lap pace and battling hard with Max Verstappen in the sprint, and obviously fending off Fernando Alonso in the race to finish third. I think that warrants a 9 out of 10 for me.
I completely agree, but I've gone for a 10 out of 10. I don't know what more Charles Leclerc could have done. I think he had the perfect weekend. He's the only person to beat the Red Bulls in qualifying when they haven't crashed.
I suppose so.
He beat Verstappen in the sprint race. He beat a Red Bull in the sprint race over a third race distance, but he's still long enough to be beaten, as he was on Sunday. And then finished best of the rest on the Sunday. Finished third.
It's a 9.5. It's a 9.5 regardless for him. Same as
it's
Perez.
A 9.5, but I'm surprised you haven't gone higher, because I think he's truly deserving of a 10. We've given out 3 10 out of 10s this season so far. 1 for Verstappen in Bahrain, 1 for Perez in Saudi Arabia, and 1 for Hamilton at Australia. I think this is the best of the lot. I think he had an absolutely perfect weekend at the time he needed it most. I'm surprised you haven't gone for a 10 out of 10 as a Leclerc fan, because watching on, I don't know what more he could have done to get a 10 out of 10.
The thing is, for me, obviously, it was going to be hard, whatever the circumstances throughout the race. We know that Red Bull have got superior race pace to the Ferrari. Yes, I do agree that he couldn't have done anything more. But for me, I'm just hungry of a race victory. I think for myself, and I think all the Ferrari fans out there, I think everyone is hungry to see Red Bull dethroned and Ferrari to be back on top once again, like they did last season. But it's been that long race win drought where we've not seen a race win for the Ferrari, and I think that is, for me, deep down, that is what is stopping me from giving Leclerc a 10. I think if he even if he got second place, even if he displaced Perez and Verstappen in the race, that would have given me a 10 out of 10. I think that is 10 out of 10 worthy if they split him in the race. The sprint for me, I'm going to say it, and I've said it on record, I find the sprint irrelevant. I really do. I really find the sprint irrelevant.
Especially this season.
Exactly. And if he did it in in the race, if he split him, obviously 50 laps, if he split him and finished second, I think that would have been a 10 out of 10 performance for me from Leclerc. But for me, a 9 out of 10, which is a 9.5 out of 10 regardless, same as Perez. But yeah, I think that little bit of extra hunger is what I need in Leclerc and what I need Ferrari to kind of muster up to kind of boost him to get 10 out of 10 throughout this whole season potentially.
I do agree. However, I think it's all relative. I think the Ferrari is every car is such a long way behind that Red Bull that you have to kind of take that into account. Like if Lando Norris finished fifth, you would give him a 10 out of 10 because the pace of the McLaren compared to the other cars is so different that is going beyond what he could have done. And I think the same for Charles Leclerc. To beat both Red Bulls in qualifying, both qualifyings, then to beat a Red Bull in the sprint race, Verstappen had damage, but he still held him off. And then to finish third in the race, I think warrants 10 out of 10. But 9.5 it is. I don't know what more Leclerc could have done, is my point.
Alonso, what does he get for you?
7 out of 10. Disappointing qualifying sessions. I know it wasn't entirely his fault. Sprint, he was slightly recovered, and then obviously he had a good race due to a lovely overtake on Sainz. But overall, it's a little bit of a disappointing. I think it's his most disappointing weekend this year. First race as well, he hasn't got a podium this year, so maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but I've gone for a 7.
I've given him a 7.5 out of 10. I kind of share the same thoughts as you. We've obviously seen him at the highs of podiums this season so far. Like you say, the first race where he's not achieved a podium. And I think he'll be bitterly disappointed by it, especially with his outstanding performances. So I'm happy to either concede a 7 or give him a 7.5 out of 10. I really don't mind here.
We'll stick with you. He did finish fourth at the end of the day, and he did almost hunt down Leclerc for that podium.
On to Carlos Sainz. I've given him an 8 out of 10. I think obviously the Hamilton behind him couldn't get past him, Stroll as well, and obviously he got overtaken by Alonso, which is just fair enough. But for me, I think it's a confidence booster for Sainz more than anything. And like we said, where I didn't give Charles Leclerc a 10 out of 10, which I kind of should have. I think a confidence booster for Ferrari is necessary, and I think P5 is all that Carlos Sainz could muster. I don't think he could have held on to P4. I think Alonso was just that little bit better throughout the race. But I think an 8 out of 10 is a good rating for him.
Wait, so hang on, you've given Alonso a 7.5 and Sainz an 8.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so on paper, Sainz's result is a very solid result for him at a time he needed it, given everything that's happened for the first 3 races for Ferrari and himself. When you actually look at it, he was anonymous this weekend. The only reason he kept Hamilton behind is because whatever was going on with it in the sprint race or in the race with the DRS, and I don't know, but he finished 30 seconds behind his teammate.
Yes,
we criticize Stroll for finishing 30 seconds behind his teammate.
Yes.
I've given Sainz a 6 out of 10. I'm happy to meet in the middle with a 7 because I think maybe I've been a little bit harsh. Yeah. But I thought he was quite anonymous this weekend. He's good in qualifying, but then in the race he was nowhere.
But I think
to get overtaken in the manner he did by Alonso as well would be very disappointing.
I think he had the consistency throughout the weekend. Obviously, he qualified 4th. He may have been anonymous, but we're talking about a P5. It's like mid. I gave Fernando a 7.5 because we've got an innate expectation on Fernando Alonso's shoulders this season for him to be getting podiums, which obviously Charles Leclerc came out of nowhere. Ferrari, boom, perfect, spot on. And I think we're expecting Alonso to challenge higher up in qualifying. He obviously qualified 6th, shootout was 8th, sprint was 6th, and obviously finished 4th in the race. So I think the expectation is a little bit off Carlos Sainz. I think he's had enough woes, especially after Australia, where that penalty, I think, kind of just shot all of his confidence. We heard him on the radio. I think personally, from my standpoint, I think that penalty just alone shot all of his confidence down. And it's not the Carlos you want to see, but I'm happy to meet in the middle for a 7 out of 10 for Carlos. Most definitely. I'm happy to do that. Moving on to Hamilton, P6 in the race. What have you given your Mercedes driver? Your Mercedes, the Brit, the number one, the 7-time world champion. What is it?
Well, I wish I could give him a rating relative of a 7-time world champion, but I gave him a 7. I thought he had a little bit of a disappointment. If he had got past Sainz and got up to 5th, which I think he fully deserved, then it would have been an 8. I think the way in which he recovered, obviously after that safety car, getting completely messed over, he actually came out of the pits in like 13 because Mercedes completely messed up their pit stop and where they placed him back out, so they shouldn't have called him in for a pit stop at that time, knowing he would come out behind that group of about 5 cars. So I think he recovered very well to do that. Overtook Russell with a great move and capitalised on a mistake from Stroll. Again, as I said, if he got past Sainz, I would have given him an 8.
Similar to you, I've gone 7 out of 10. I don't think I really need to expand on the points that you've just said. I think once again we're looking at a bit of a mid Hamilton weekend. It's there or thereabouts. Yeah, I think the expectations from Mercedes after a podium they had in Australia was just to kind of challenge Ferrari. And Ferrari just came out the blocks out of nowhere and just kind of went, see you later, Mercedes, kind of swept them aside and
I got my hopes up a little bit after Australia.
Yeah,
I think excited.
I think every single Mercedes fan would. But yeah, I've given Hamilton a 7 out of 10. Lance Stroll, moving on to P7 man, I've given them a 6 out of 10. I think, I think we just give him a 6 out of 10. Move on. Because I don't think there's much to talk about Lance Stroll. I think again, it's a weekend where, similar to Sainz, where you mentioned earlier, I just think he's nowhere to be seen in relation to his teammate.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah, a little bit lucky to get P7. Solid points, but a disappointing weekend overall when you consider the qualifying, the issues, and making that mistake to let Hamilton through as well. Because maybe he could have got P6 if he hadn't made that mistake. Because we saw the Mercedes struggle to overtake, but yeah.
What have you given George Russell?
I gave him a 7 because I'm also taking into account his sprint race performance. I think to qualify 4th and then to finish 4th in the sprint is a mighty performance. Didn't have as good a race, but obviously had the positions to make up, starting 11th. But overall, if you take that into account this weekend, I think he will be quite happy given the performance on Saturday.
Once again, I couldn't agree more. I've given George Russell a 7 as well. Like you said, the Saturday performance alone, I think, was his highlight of his weekend. I don't think his qualifying performance was just nowhere to be seen. His race, obviously, he recovered to finish P7. So all in all, I think it was a decent weekend for George. And I've given the same rating for Lando Norris and Yuki Tsunoda. 7 out of 10s for both. I mean, Yuki Tsunoda, obviously his shootout wasn't brilliant, but I think his race performance alone, I think, kind of rescued his weekend. And with Lando Norris, his sprint kind of let him down, but his qualifying, his shootout and his race kind of helped him to kind of stabilize a decent weekend for himself. So 7 out of 10 for P9 and P10 man, Lando Norris and Yuki Tsunoda for me.
I was a little bit nicer to Norris. I gave him a 7.5. He was actually ahead of Russell until that safety car came out. Until he pit, because he pit in the same lap as Hamilton. Frustrated behind Hülkenberg and Ocon. Obviously, he made up those positions when they pit, and solid points from McLaren. I think they'll definitely take that given their struggles in the first 2 races. And then for Yuki Tsunoda, I gave him a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I think he's been one of the most consistent performers this season. Yuki. Another 10th place performance, got his points and didn't have to rely on a penalty for Carlos Sainz to do so as well. Got it off of the pure pace. See you rolling your eyes. But yeah, no, I thought Tsunoda's performance this weekend, he had a bad Saturday, but he got points on the Sunday, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, I'm only rolling my eyes because you're constantly giving me those flashbacks of Australia. That's the only reason, simply to put that into perspective. But Oscar Piastri finished P11. Ethan, what have you given the McLaren rookie?
Gave him a 6 out of 10. Solid race, solid result. He showed good pace all weekend, actually. Got through to Q3 on the Friday, and obviously finished 10th in the sprint, 11th in the race. So I think it's a solid solid result for Piastri.
I've given him a 6.5 out of 10. I think very consistent throughout the weekend. Obviously, I mean, he's obviously wanting to challenge for a points finish with his teammate in ninth. But I think it's another solid weekend and another race to build that foundation to get even better in Formula One. Alex Albon P12. I also gave him a 6.5 out of 10. I think his Saturday was obviously better than his Friday and his Sunday. And I think that kind of showed his intention. He couldn't get it. He couldn't get the points that he desired in the sprint and the race. He was obviously 2 places off. But yeah, 6.5 out of 10 for Alex Albon.
I gave him a 7 out of 10. I was quite impressed with Albon this weekend. Got through to Q3 on the Saturday in the sprint shootout. Couldn't quite hold on to the 8th place. He was fighting with Stroll for 8th. But yeah, disappointing not to get points on the Saturday, and then had a all qualifying for what you would expect for Alex Albon in a Williams around Baku. And then was, again, guilty, stuck in that DRS train for a long period of the race. So 7 out of 10. Maybe I'll knock it down to a 6.5.
K-Mag, what does he get from you?
5. Wasn't too impressed with K-Mag this weekend. Had issues, but overall, again, like I said earlier, it's difficult to judge these drivers in the midfield because they were stuck in a train for 30 laps. They couldn't do anything. Nothing really happened. So I gave him a 5 out of 10.
I also gave him a 5 out of 10. I think you kind of stick with it and move on once again. Like we say, you can't really judge it. Being stuck in a DRS train for 30 odd laps, you can't really judge a performance on that. Obviously, his highlight was the sprint, where he finished 11th. But I think by K-Mag standards, I think he's expecting a little bit more. Moving on to the 2 Alpine drivers in P14, P15, Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. You know what? I've gone harsh for Gasly, and I think he deserves it after this performance. I've given him a 2 out of 10. Simply put it like that. I think it's honestly a horror show for him. I've given Ocon a little bit more. I've given Ocon a 3.5 out of 10. But for Alpine standards, yeah.
Wow.
And I know you're shocked, but for Alpine standards, yeah.
I'm quite shocked about that. I gave Pierre Gasly a 3 out of 10. I was harsh as well because I thought he was a shocking performance. But for Esteban Ocon, I think he done the best he could. He made the best of a bad situation, really. He was started from the pit lane on Sunday and made up some positions, was running well until that safety car took a gamble, stayed out, hoped that the safety car would breed more safety cars and he would have a free pit stop. Didn't quite happen. He didn't get that free pit stop and ended up suffering as a result at the end, where he dropped down the order. So I gave him a 6 out of 10.
Okay. So a 4.5 out of 10, is that? I gave him a 3.5. We'll say a 5. We'll give him a 5.
Round up to a 5. Be a bit nice.
We'll be a bit nice. I may have been a little bit harsh, but I think I had to scrutinise the Alpine. I think yeah, that weekend it's just kind of a bit of a downer for them. Logan Sargent, what have you given the American?
3 out of 10. Again, poor performance. Didn't really do anything. Didn't crash. Oh no, he did crash. He crashed on the Saturday qualifying. But yeah, poor weekend for him. He seems to be going downhill a little bit, so disappointing.
Yeah, I gave Logan a 4.5 out of 10. I was a little bit more lenient on him, but I think the 4.5 is rookie tax. I think very much rookie tax for me. But yeah, I mean, he crashed. I'm looking on this on reflection and thinking, why am I giving him a 4.5 out of 10?
Give it Esteban Ocon a 3.5.
And Esteban, you know what? I'll keep them two the same. I'll give the two of them 3.5 out of 10. But then again, we've rounded Ocon up to a 5. So thinking about it, I think I may have given him an extra point of rookie tax, which happens with me quite a lot. But I think Logan Sargent, his weekend just wasn't brilliant. Wrapping these up quickly, Hulkenberg and Bottas the final 2 points finishes. Hulkenberg, I gave him a 4, and Bottas, I gave him a 2. Similar to Gasly, I think for those two drivers to have done so poorly at a track where they're very familiar. It's just, yeah, I just couldn't believe it.
I was a little bit nicer. I gave Hulkenberg a 5 out of 10 because he did do that, 48, 49 lap stint on those hard tyres and, was running 10th for the majority of the race and didn't get that bit of luck towards the end. Valtteri Bottas, completely agree. I gave him a 2 out of 10. Awful performance for such an experienced driver.
Rounding off our driver predictions, Guan Yu Zhou, I gave him a 4 out of 10. I think his sprint alone probably the highlight of his Baku weekend. And Nick De Vries, have we had a 1 out of 10 on this on the series yet?
We haven't. The lowest we had before today was a 3 out of 10 for Lando Norris at Jeddah.
Well, I've just dropped a 1 out of 10.
Same. Yeah. Terrible weekend. I also gave Nick De Vries a 1 out of 10. I gave Guan Yu Zhou a 5 out of 10. I thought he had a decent weekend, but all in all, he got a little bit unlucky. Had that retirement, which I think he would have been on for a good result if it wasn't for that engine failure.
To round off the episode, obviously a rapid turnaround. We're in Miami this weekend. Time for Miami predictions. So Ethan, quickly to round off the episode, 2-star predictions to begin with. Hit me with them.
McLaren double points. I think they've improved. They brought updates, and I think they're going to be a lot better in Miami. And I've gone a little bit left field. I've gone no issues with the TV direction. Obviously, we remember last year about how poor the TV direction was. How many crowd shots they showed? They showed I think a shot of the tree at the end of one of the straights, so you can actually see the action going on. So I'm going with no issues now with the TV direction.
2-star predictions for me. I've gone with a Haas double Q1 elimination. I think they have gone slightly backwards, and I see McLaren Haas a double Q1 elimination for them. And my second one, I think it might hurt you a little bit, but I've gone Russell to miss out on the top 5. I think that with Ferrari being back, Russell will miss out. Alonso, obviously, firm favourite for a top 5 finish as well. And I think Ferrari have kind of replaced Mercedes in the hunt for a podium. Ethan, quickly, give me your qualifying predictions. What are they? It's probably Verstappen on pole, isn't it?
No, Perez on pole. The only street track he hasn't won it yet. Car park track he hasn't won it yet. Verstappen in second, Alonso third, Leclerc fourth, Hamilton fifth. I've changed this around a little bit, but yeah, I think Perez will get pole.
I've gone with Verstappen on pole position, Leclerc in second. I think after Azerbaijan, it's given me a little bit more hope and confidence in Ferrari. Perez in third, Sainz in fourth, and Hamilton in fifth. Alonso nowhere to be seen for me.
Interesting.
Yes, very interesting. And for the race, I've gone with Verstappen winning the race, Leclerc to finish second, to split the 2 Red Bulls. Yes, I want to see it, and I am going to see it in Miami. Yes, Ferrari and Leclerc are going to do it. Perez in third, Hamilton to overtake Sainz to finish fourth, and Sainz will finish fifth.
Interesting. I've gone for Perez to win and to take the lead of the championship, which I would love to see. Verstappen second, of course, because it's a Red Bull. Alonso to finish third and get back on that podium. Hamilton to overtake Leclerc, so Hamilton fourth, Leclerc fifth.
Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. But that rounds off episode 11 of OnTheGrid Podcast. I've been your host, Adrian Kita. Ethan, thank you for joining me on this episode. We'll be back next week reviewing Miami. Once again, looking over the race, looking over our predictions, probably most likely how horrendous they are. And hopefully we have another fantastic weekend of racing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Thank you for tuning into all the episodes out there on our YouTube, Spotify, etc. We'll see you next weekend. We'll see you next week, should I say.